Welcome to humanity, the epicenter of ideas surrounding transformative change that will revolutionize the way our world interacts with technology.
So what is AWS doing to promote social good? Our guest today will describe how his work with AWS is promoting social good and changing the world. I'm Kevin Castle, and welcome to the Humanity Podcast, where we inform and empower the public through powerful dialogue with IT visionaries. Joining me today is Mark Schwartz, Enterprise Strategist at Amazon Web Services. Mark is a published author, award-winning CIO, and a change agent who has led organizations in creating innovative solutions to some of the toughest business challenges around. He is known for formulating powerful visions and using them to drive change in complex environments. Mark, welcome to the Humanity Podcast.
Hi, thank you.
Really happy to have you on. And I think most of our listeners who are tuning in would probably best know you for your book publications that you've shared with us in the community. So I figured we got to start there, since that's where most people might pick up on your name and know you by reputation. And so I guess my first question is, why don't you give us a run through the books that you've written kind of in succession? And I wanted just to cover each of them, just to draw out like what are the main themes, so that if our listeners are interested, they can tear into them as well.
Sure. So each of the books I wrote because I felt like somebody should be writing them. You know, there was a subject that was just on my mind, and I couldn't believe that nobody had written about them before. So the first one was called The Art of Business Value. And I wrote that because there was so much talk in the IT world about business value and delivering business value and being agile and not focusing on cost and schedule, but on delivering business value. And the phrase kept coming up. And I thought, do people really know what they're talking about when they say business value? Because it's not obvious, actually. It's a pretty subtle and interesting subject. So I wrote that book as sort of an exploration of what we really mean by business value and why understanding it could actually change the way you practice IT.
Oh,
That led me to the second book, because there was a chapter in there on the role of the CIO in an organization and how the CIO participates in deciding what's considered valuable to the business. And I thought it was just a chapter in that book. It was worth a whole book on its own. It was an interesting topic. So I started from the question of now that everything's changing in the IT world, and we're digital and we're agile and we're doing DevOps and things like that, how does that change the way that you lead an IT organization? You know, instead of, we all know how it changes the way you run a project or execute technologically, but does it change what a CIO does, you know, and what IT leadership looks like? So A Seat at the Table was my book about that. And one of the conclusions in the book was that we've had this weird way of fitting IT into the rest of an enterprise, where it's we talk about IT and the business as if those are two separate things, and there's this kind of arm's length relationship of passing requirements back and forth and passing product back and forth. What I realized is that was causing a lot of issues around value that IT could deliver, and causing waste. And so that turned out to be the theme of that book. I suggested that we change that relationship between IT and the rest of the business and make it a closer relationship. And so the feedback from the IT community was, this is great, you know, we love this idea, but somebody should tell the business people about that. And so that led to the third book, right? I figured, what does this look like if you're a non-IT business executive?
Mm-hmm.
And why should you change the way you work with an IT organization? And how can I explain it? So that was my book, War and Peace in IT. And so that sequence was a sequence for me. My fourth book came out of a slightly different place. I had spent some time in government IT, and I learned a lot about bureaucracy and how it works. I mean, you can't help it if you're in a government agency. And I realized working with customers of Amazon Web Services, who I meet with a lot, that sometimes the difficulty in doing a digital transformation was the established bureaucracy within their organization and the way it held things back. And I thought maybe I learned some things working in the bureaucracy that would help organizations that are finding themselves stuck in bureaucracy. So I wrote something called The Delicate Art of Bureaucracy, Digital Transformation with the Monkey, the Razor, and the Sumo Wrestler, to explain how you might deal with bureaucracy. And once again, I couldn't figure out why nobody had written a book about how to use a monkey, a razor, and a sumo wrestler to defeat bureaucracy. So it felt like I had to write it.
And so, I mean, I guess that's the most interesting, because every topic that you've laid out, comes the theme of each of these books are so impactful to what the demand that we're seeing on technology leaders and the stewardship that are required for us to actually help IT drive forward strategy and put that forth, right? So, I mean, the timeliness and impact from the folks who I know that have read and have followed you has been tremendous to the community that you made. I mean, for your first book, when you were first starting to go down this journey, what actually made you want to get a pen out and start going through a book versus using other mediums? Just curious.
Oh, well, like a lot of people, I'd always wanted to write one. And I realized that to write a book, you had to actually sit down and write. And I wasn't sure. I think everybody should really go through this thought process. Would you actually enjoy the process of writing a book? Because if not, you're probably not going to do it. So when I started writing it, I found that I actually enjoyed it. I was having fun writing, and I kept going back over my prose and making changes and tweaking it, and making it better. And I thought it was tremendous fun. Once I got started and I realized that I could do it, then it was easy to say, let's do some more.
Okay. All right. Okay. And kind of what would you say are some of the overarching, I mean, like when you look at what CIOs are going through and how organizations are working and partnering with their IT groups, what are some of the higher level themes that you're seeing, right? Whether it's coming from IT groups or whether it's coming from the business side of the equation, what is going on in that partnership as we look at the, now and then also your thoughts on it going forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having noticed that there's this weird separation, right? You don't usually talk about marketing and the business, or sales and the business, or operations and the business, but we do talk about IT and the business, as if IT and the business are two separate things. Now, of course, IT is part of the business. We know that. But I started to think about, where does that come from? Why do we talk that way? Why is IT special? And I think I traced it back in my mind to when IT was really first introduced to companies, which was pretty recently, right? So here you are, a manager of a company, you're running things and things are going just fine, and you're all happy. And then all of a sudden, you have to have these computer things, and you don't understand how they work. And in order to work them, you got to bring in these kind of geeky people who know how to work computers. And immediately you start to think, like, how can I control them if I don't understand what they're doing, right? This is sort of a management puzzle. And it turns out that there's a certain amount of trust involved, but instead this idea developed that the geeks, these sort of stereotypes, right? The geeks are going to go and play with technology and waste our money if we don't do something to control them. And on the other side, the geeks kind of said, oh, these annoying people with suits, they don't understand the technology. They don't understand what it takes to do these things. So you wound up with these stereotypes. And then the only paradigm for sort of controlling what the geeks were doing without understanding what they were doing was to say, tell me exactly how long this is going to take you to do. And then to monitor how long it took and say, how come you didn't finish it when you said you would? I mean, how else could you control it if you didn't really understand what was going on inside the box,
right.
And so we wound up with this sort of paradigm for how you manage IT. You have the business writes a set of requirements, and then they toss it over the wall to the IT organization, which then estimates how long it's going to take to do those requirements and puts together a project plan. And then they negotiate how long it's going to take in the project plan. And then the technologists start executing and they give status reports. And, there's this back and forth where you might as well be contracting the work out to an outside contractor. IT is in the organization, but it's acting like a separate organization, a contractor.
Right.
And so it's this arm's length thing that causes so much waste in the process. You have to spend so much effort getting those requirements ready to give them to IT, so that IT can't later on not deliver some of them. You have to get them perfect. There can't be any scope creep. All of these things. It's wasteful when you really think about it.
Right.
So that was one trend. Anyway, I think now it manifests itself a little bit differently now, because technology can move much faster now. And when you look at what's slowing companies down, usually it's not exactly the technology anymore. It's that big process I just described. That's what's actually taking the time and slowing everybody down.
Right. Yeah, we had a guest on, Neil Sahota, who was one of the folks tapped at IBM to roll out Watson, right? Various organizations, and he oversaw like 14,000 different implementations of their Watson AI platform. And one of the things he was saying is, it's been 10 years since the Big Jeopardy thing, right? And he's like, the capabilities of natural language processing and all these other capabilities of AI, it's there. It's not really, that's really not the shortcoming right now. It's really the envisioning of figuring out how you can actually apply it and make an impact that's measurable to claim success, or to rev and continue until there's an outcome that's desirable, right? So is like that understanding of business leadership applied with the technology understanding is the gap that we see, right? So to your point, yeah, we are
right. Or what takes time. What takes time often is conceptualizing a project, writing a business case for it, approving the business case through a governance process, making a project plan, assembling requirements. Those things take a lot longer than actually just building things.
Right. So where are we left right now then? I mean, are we, I get looking back, right? This is where we were at. It's a new capability, so it's a new function in its immaturity cycle, if you will, right? So now it's evolved so much, the pace of innovation and possible is much more than ever. Where are we at now, and kind of where's our scorecard as business leaders and IT partners, and what does it look like going forward?
Well, I meet with about 150 businesses a year, generally at the senior executive levels, and generally because they are facing impediments in trying to do the new thing, trying to be digital. And the impediments are never technical, almost never technical, right? It's always things like cultural change and organizational structure and governance models and financing and investment approaches and things like that. And I think they feel a little bit frustrated because they've realized that the world around them changes really fast now.
Mm-hmm.
And that the technology changes really fast, but they've still set up these long processes in order to be able to do anything. So the world changes fast, but your reaction time is slow because you have to think about all these, governance and business cases and stuff like that. So the trick, I think, for most organizations is to take advantage of speed to shorten their governance processes, essentially. Because we can move so quickly now, we can get results really quickly. And if you get results really quickly, there's less risk in your investment because you have constant checkpoints where you see you're getting results. And if there's less risk in your investment, then you can take fewer risk mitigation steps, right? You don't need to put as much process up front to deal with the big risk. It's a virtuous circle, reduce risk by being fast, and that lets you be fast and do that. And that's the little, kind of mental shift that everybody has to make, and some organizations are making it faster than others.
And so now that we have these process approaches like Agile and these iterative approaches to developing software and running projects and programs, who's needing to adapt, right? And how much should the business counterparts and the IT counterparts move, right? And what's what's that conversation typically like from your vantage point in terms of getting movement started?
There's still a lot of organizations haven't made that adaptation, and they're trying. They're in that process. What it looks like, I think, when it's done right, is there isn't the business in IT. There's just the business, and some people in the business have technical skills and a background, and other people have operational skill teams now. And the cross-functional team can have business expertise and technical expertise of different kinds. And the team can share an objective, a business objective. It's no longer about requirements and IT requirements. It's about, let's take a business challenge and solve it. And to solve it, it's going to take technical skills and business operational skills, and it's going to take an input of capital and resources, and it's going to take business process changes and whatever else, and maybe writing some software. If you see what I mean, it's more of a team effort where the team includes people who are technologists and people who aren't, and all they really care about is solving to a business objective, not answering to a big stack of requirements documents.
Right. Do you see when you were doing all your research for all of your books, were there other parallels within other departments where there was that cross-functional teaming, if you will, on different projects or initiatives?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that kind of teaming has always existed informally. So if you're going to do a marketing campaign, it's going to be coordinated with a sales organization and operations and everybody else who needs to be coordinated. And it's usually an interactive process to get there, as opposed to the technology thing of, you do your part and then toss it over the wall. Yeah. And we'll do our part.
Right.
Yeah. So there's more of that. But one thing I suggest, and I don't hear a lot of other people talking about this, but I think it's an interesting way to think. You have your executive team, right? Your C-suite, and they're the executive team for the company. We call it that, but it's not a team, right? A team is working together against a shared objective, where typically the C-suite is working in silos. The CIO is in charge of technology, CMO is in charge of marketing, CFO is in charge of finance. They've each got their own sort of independent domains, and usually they're only a team in name. Each is focused on their own thing. But the way that teams work these days, it's more about having a cross-functional team that's working together against a single set of objectives, and interacting and using their diversity of strengths and backgrounds in order to figure out the best way to accomplish something. So I feel like at the senior leadership level, there's an opportunity to have more of an integrated team that organizations haven't yet really started to take advantage of.
Right. And are you specifically for IT leaders as they look at forming those teams? I mean, so much strategy that we see right now can be set from knowing what's possible with technology, right? Whether it's how you engage with your customers or looking at data to create new products or services to go to market with. I mean, there's a lot of upfront strategy of what's possible that can be brought to the table in those teams. So have you seen a shift in how, the C-suite at the CEO level is looking to their, head of IT counterparts to bring that forward? Or is that something that you're seeing where it's being pushed up?
Yeah, it's a mix. And your point is valid and really important. The old idea was, when you have a business goal, well, it's the business people, the non-IT people, who figure out what needs to be done to solve it, and then the technologists execute on that. But who is it these days who's going to know how to meet that business objective? Well, it could be technologists, it could be marketing, it could be operating, it could be anybody. And maybe, arguably, it's the technologists who are more likely to know what the requirements should be. So, if you want to push it to the extreme, maybe it's the IT people who should be writing the requirements and the rest of the business should be executing against them, right?
Interesting. Okay. Interesting. I'm thinking it through.
It really, the old way of thinking about it doesn't make as much sense anymore. And tactically, sometimes organizations are figuring that out, but I think if you look at it big picture, it doesn't make any sense anymore to have those value decisions made on the business side and then just sort of handed to the technologists.
Right. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. So I guess, to kind of wrap up the summary of your books and all the themes that you've covered, the one question I really want to ask is and I know that when you dive into these topics of bureaucracy and understanding agility of organizations and team dynamic with IT executives and what is business value and how do you capture and deliver, where do you see the role of the CIO in the next 5-10 years? What's that picture in your mind of how you think it will evolve from where it's evolved from, when you started writing to now? Kind of to carry that forward.
I think looking at like an executive team, a senior leadership team, what you really want is a group that's looking to solve the company's problems or meet its strategic objectives, and they have different ways of looking at each goal or objective or challenge. The CFO looks at it from the perspective of finance, but the CFO runs the entire company from the perspective of finance. The CFO is involved in operations and marketing and everything else. The CMO is participating in everything the company does, but from the perspective of marketing and having marketing skills.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the CIO is the person who has the understanding of technology and also contributes to the managing of the entire company, but does it from the perspective of somebody who's educated and has experience in technology.
Mm-hmm.
Together, they make an executive team that is really well equipped to lead the company. That's a very different role for a CIO than the traditional one of the other executives figure out what needs to be done, and then the CIO is a project manager, essentially, who gets the technology part of it done.
Right. Okay, sounds good. Well, we kind of loosely covered your impact on some of the things that you do at AWS. Why don't we start there, right? Because I'm curious to understand your role there. You said you meet with 150 business leaders every year. What are you doing at AWS, and does that tie to your other work that we just discussed as well?
Yeah. Yes, it does, of course. It's all very logical, as is my degree in philosophy and experience as a filmmaker and the other things I've done. It all fits together. So my role at AWS is it fits together like the monkey, the razor, and the sumo wrestler fit together in defeating bureaucracy, I would say. I'm part of a team at AWS. We call it Enterprise Strategy. And it's a team of people who were CIOs or CTOs or other CXOs before they joined AWS. And all of us did some sort of digital transformation in our former roles. All of us did a big migration to the cloud. And so we fulfill a couple of different roles at AWS. One is we meet with senior executives of large enterprises to help them with those challenges, the non-technical challenges. Because we hear from so many other customers and because we've lived it ourselves, we sometimes have good tricks and mental models and frameworks that can help them get through those impediments. So we do that. We also speak at conferences and events. We write blog posts and articles and books, of course, all geared to helping executives understand and deal with these new ways of thinking about IT and technology that have been brought on by the digital revolution, or whatever you want to call it. So the books, I started writing them before I joined AWS, but the role they really play is there are certain topics that come up really often when we're talking to enterprise executives. They face such similar challenges, and it's true across the private sector and the public sector. When you're a big organization, there are certain challenges in transforming. And my books and the books of my colleagues on the team tend to address those challenges. You know, the things we hear from customers a lot are in their way.
Okay. Well, interesting. And so a day in the life for you, Mark, are you commonly out? Well, I mean, prior to things being shut down and travel being slowed down, were you typically out and about, kind of like deeply engaged into your customers' strategy and roadmap and planning exercises?
I was traveling 80 to 90% of the time.
Okay.
I was always on the road before COVID. So obviously it's changed a lot. But I was usually going out to these companies, to our customers, and our engagements typically are not one time, but few times, few touches. We're not like consultants who stay around for a long time and charge a lot of money and all of that. We're actually a free service. We try to get to a company at exactly the right moment, you know, when we can give them that little shove or, you know, assist that lets them move forward. And then we come back again when they need us again.
Okay. Well, that's okay. Very cool. One of the things that we had talked about was, you know, the impact that AWS is playing in just overall social good and some of the initiatives that you've been supporting in that area. It would be great to hear a little bit more about that side of it. I think as somebody who's heavily involved in the technology space and, you know, partnering with AWS as well, this is an area I haven't really heard about. So I'm sure people that are tuning in and listening would be interested to hear as well.
Yeah, I touch so many parts of AWS, you know, in the nature of what I do. And I started to discover that we were actually doing all of these interesting things around social good. And I started to connect the dots and really see what we had going on across the enterprise. So I think the first thing to understand is that we really believe in the cloud. AWS pioneered the cloud in the first place. We think it's a game changer. You know, it's an enabler. It's not the change itself, but with the cloud, we can do so many new things that just weren't possible before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when it comes to high performance computing, to do genomics or something like that. Well, in the cloud, you can suddenly spin up 1 million servers if you need to, and have them work for 5 minutes on a problem and then go away, right? Those kinds of things you couldn't really do before. The cloud opens up so many new possibilities, and it's a world-changing thing. So businesses, of course, are discovering how they can change their business models through the cloud and taking advantage of these things they can do. But it's such a deep new way of doing things that it can also impact society in all sorts of other ways that I think are fascinating. So at AWS, we tend to think in terms of our customers and what they're doing first. So if you look around at our customers, some of them are governments, some of them are nonprofits, and they are using the cloud in all these interesting new ways. And we love to see what they're doing and to produce the tools that are going to help them do those things. So for example, the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, ICMEC, they are using our machine learning capabilities, our image recognition in particular, to look for photos of missing children on the web, on the dark web, and try to find these missing children and get a clue that they can pass on to law enforcement to try to locate the children.
Wow.
That's something that would have been hard to do before,
Right.
but since we've made machine learning so easily available and image recognition, it's magic. It's new magic you can do, and it's a beautiful thing.
Wow.
An organization called Thorn is all
solutions stood up, Mark, right now, and have you guys been able to use that to track down any missing persons?
Oh yeah, they use it. We don't.
Yeah, right.
I think at one point I was told that they were I'm not sure. I don't. I haven't fact checked this, but I was told at one point they were locating 5 children a week through this.
Wow.
Which is awesome, right?
Amazing, yeah.
You have so Thorn is also about human trafficking and stopping it using AWS tools. An interesting one I noticed is the International Rice Research Institute, IRRI, which is trying to, since so much of the world depends on rice for its basic nutrition, and climate change can change the growing circumstances for rice. So they're using the cloud to look at to breed the strains of rice that are going to be most resistant to climate change, for example. Wow, right? All of these wow things. So that's the first lens that we look at social good through, is what amazing things are. Then we look at how we can support customers in doing some of these things. So, for example, we have our Imagine nonprofit grants. We select a number of nonprofit projects each year, and we fund them and give them credits. We do cloud credits for research. We have conferences to bring together people who are innovating in the nonprofit world and in the education world. So we do a whole bunch of things to try to support these interesting ideas and help our customers get them to market. And then the third area is, there's a bunch of things that we are able to do ourselves as Amazon Web Services. And among them, for example, we have a set of cloud innovation centers. Usually we partner with universities or other organizations, and the cloud innovation centers take on challenges from communities, from local governments, from nonprofits, and they work together with students in the university, or it's slightly different in each of the cloud innovation centers. They work backwards to solve the challenge that they're given. So, for example, at Arizona State University, we have a Cloud Innovation Center, and they're working on reducing homelessness in Phoenix, for example. Wow. There's a Cloud Innovation Center in Australia that's it's a Cloud Innovation Center specifically looking at how to use data for social good. A Cloud Innovation Center worked on getting access in South Africa to data on the integrity of the water supplies, so they could make sure that they got clean water to the right places. So the Cloud Innovation Centers are an AWS thing that I think is, it shows the power of the cloud to solve social problems, which I found fascinating when I learned about it. Another big area is education. So we have a program called AWS Restart, where we take a community where there is unemployment or underemployment, and get people skills in working in the cloud, up-to-date cloud skills, and then place them in jobs. Working through our customer base to see which customers need people and can work with entry-level cloud experts. And so we take people from unemployment or underemployment through the training they need all the way to placing them in positions. So we've rolled that out in a number of cities around the world. One other one I want to tell you about, because I find it fascinating. We have an AWS disaster response team that when there's a natural disaster of some kind, let's say, hurricanes and flooding or wildfires or something, they show up and and try to get things running again.
Wow.
And they've become really good at it. So, for example, if there's a flood, they might come with a what we call a snowball edge, a computing device that's portable and extremely rugged. You can't destroy it. You can try your best. You won't be able to destroy a snowball.
Okay.
And they'll load it up with data about the area where the flooding is, maps and stuff, for example. And then they'll take it to the flood and fly drones around to scan the flooded area, which they'll then match up with the maps and figure out where people might need to go to rescue people who are in danger. They'll be able to target rescue efforts because they're able to combine the maps and the drone footage. So anyway, as AWS, we can take some of these amazing possibilities of the cloud and find these interesting ways to use them for social good. And it shows the power, I think, of this thing that we've created.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What I would love to do is if I can get further information about your Imagine program, Cloud Innovation Centers, and the AWS Restart, it'd be great to share with the listeners as well. We could put it in the show notes when we do the, publish everything.
Sure.
But yeah, that's fascinating. Great to hear you guys are involved in so much. And I guess, one of the questions I have is, so for those ideas of what's possible, right? Knowing the AWS stack, knowing what capabilities it has for AI and all these things, how much of, are you, with the community and nonprofits, are you pushing those ideas of here's what's possible? Or is it more, broadcasting what's possible and then people coming to you guys and figuring out how to adopt, implement, and roll out?
We like to think at AWS that we've learned, and at Amazon in general, that we've learned a lot about innovation, how to do it well. And our technique for innovating is what we call working backwards. We have a whole bunch of mechanisms and techniques for doing it, but it's a way of starting from a problem and working backwards from it to what a solution needs to look like, and seeing what tools are available. And so one of the things we do is we teach this process, and offerings like our Cloud Innovation Centers actually use it. So I said they take these challenges from the local communities. Well, they take the challenge and they do a working backwards process from the challenge to figure out solutions that might work. And so part of our contribution is teaching people how to use this technique that's worked really well for all of the innovations that we've been able to create at AWS, which are basically innovations that we create based on a customer need. We say about 95% of our roadmap is driven by customer needs, things customers tell us they need. And the way we answer to those needs is through this kind of a working backwards process that it turns out can work really well for social impact as well.
Wow. That's really, really interesting. And it's amazing to see the impact that you have, Mark, across so many different organizations, the IT community at large, and your background in government and for-profit businesses. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, Mark. And I thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing your insights on your books and social good and AWS and the things that you guys are focusing on. I also want to recognize our listeners and thank you for tuning into Humanity. And I hope you've gained some valuable knowledge today. Please subscribe if you haven't already and send us any feedback or ideas you would like to see in future shows. We will also put the additional information that was talked about that Mark just referenced in terms of some of the AWS areas for nonprofits and some of the areas for skilling up, if you will. So thanks again, Mark. And I'm your host, Kevin Castle, and you've been listening to Humanity. Thank you all.